Hello, welcome back to the channel. It is Dan, Nocturne Knives. Hope you're all having a great day. Today I'm coming at you with a full review of this knife right here, the Hinderer XM-18. This particular one is the non-flipper fullered spearpoint version. This is a DLT Trading exclusive, and I will have DLT linked in the description right below here. Great retailer, they ship super fast. Would definitely recommend. So this is a knife I've had for about, I think 6 months now, something like that. You can actually go check out my unboxing and install video of this scale and some skiff bearings. It was the very first video I released on this channel. You know, on second thought, maybe you shouldn't go check it out. I haven't watched it in quite a while, but I'm sure it's very rough. You know, check it out at your own risk. I also posted a video not too long ago sharpening this and giving my first impressions. Link that one up in the top right. You can check that out. It's probably a little bit better. So I've had some time to use this. I sharpened it, I've carried it a lot, and I definitely have a couple thoughts that I want to give about this. Before we get into any of that, I'll do some measurements and comparisons. Starting off with overall length, looking at about 8 1/4. Here's the 8-inch mark, and it's just edging over that about halfway, so about 8 1/4 inches overall. Blade length, we're looking at right on 3.5, just slightly more, like 3.6, 3.5, something like that. It's really close there. And then cutting edge is going to be about 3 1/8 or so. 3 1/4, depends on exactly how you stretch that. Close length coming in at 4 3/4 inches approximately. Get some caliper measurements. So thickness on the handle, we're looking at 0.53, so definitely pretty thick on the handle. Blade stock, we're looking at 0.165, 165 thousandths. And then thickness behind the edge, we're looking at about 24 thousandths approximately. In the belly section, in the flat section, up into the belly, just a little more, 27 thousandths. Up at the tip, definitely gets thicker. You're looking at 32 thousandths, something like that. You can see tip thickness up here versus choil thickness here. And tallness, closed, like you can have it in your pocket. At the widest part, you're looking at about 1.4 inches, so 1.5 inches or so. Definitely a little bit tall, but it's not insanely so. Weight, we are coming in at 5.3 ounces, or 151 grams. Now, some size comparisons. I have these all lined up on the pivots right here. So you can see the PM2 coming in at about the same blade length, but a little bit longer in the handle, maybe 1/8 inch longer in the handle. But overall pretty close in terms of size. Cutting edge length is almost identical between the XM-18 and Spyderco PM2. And then Para 3, it's going to be significantly larger than the Para 3. Show you that. Handle thickness coming in substantially thicker than the Para 3. Up next with Spyderco Delica, coming in much larger. Two very popular knives right now, Protect Malibu and TRM Atom. It's coming in overall length very close to the Atom, pretty much identical in overall length to the Atom. And Malibu, you're looking at about 1 inch more overall. You see a lot of difference here when you take a look at stock thickness though, and handle thickness. See, the Hinderer is almost an entire handle slab thicker than the Atom. Here are some budget folders to compare to. You got the QSP Penguin and CRJB Centros. Here's another long American-made folder, Spyderco Native Chief. And lastly, another high-end American folder on bearings. These are definitely substantially different, but I feel in kind of a similar category, that high-end American machining category. Now granted, the Arius is double the price, but still. And note, the camera is at somewhat of an angle, so the area seems kind of like it's smaller, but it is actually a decent bit longer. And in my collection, one of the closest in terms of price here is my Spyderco Swish Bowie, coming in definitely substantially smaller. This one is a Taichung Taiwan made knife, but they are featuring the same steel. They're around the same price, $25 more for the Hinderer. And lastly, I have a Benchmade Griptilian in for sharpening, so I figured why not throw it up there for a comparison. These knives are actually decently similar, almost exactly the same overall. Both have chunky handles, stock that's slightly on the thicker side, kind of thicker grinds. So I feel they're in a fairly similar category, both US made. These actually have very similar materials, both M390. These are G10 handles. This comes stock with G10. So yeah, they're actually semi-comparable knives. You can see the Griptilian is actually coming in slightly thicker than the Hinderer. Now those measurements and comparisons out of the way, I will get into the meat of the review. So I'm going to start off with my likes, and then I'll talk about one super like, some neutrals, things that I'm just on, dislikes, and then some super dislikes. My first like on this is going to be, I think, the aesthetics. So I think this is a really, really good looking knife. The lines on it flow really well, this continuous curve over the top, just the angle and the shape of the blade. I think it's a really, really good looking knife. Most of Hinderer's designs have nice aesthetics, like the Eclipse. I think it looks great, same with the Firetac. I'm not as in love with the Jurassic, but most of his designs look really, really nice. My next like is going to be the action. This knife has ridiculous action. It is so nice, like legitimately an incredible action from this knife. So you disengage it and that blade just falls. Like it really free falls pretty much into the handle. A great action. And with the thumb studs, it's an absolutely effortless flick out. With the fuller, which you have easy access to on both sides, really easy to middle finger flick, and it's very satisfying. The detent is pretty light, but still snappy. It's a really, I think for this design, for this opening method layout, it's a perfectly done detent. I don't think it could be improved. It is strong enough that it gives you a nice snap on the middle finger flick, but not so strong that you can easily lock it down by getting on the lock bar. Like you really can't lock down this knife, at least if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, the middle finger flick, you can lock it down pretty easy. So this isn't a great knife for lefties. You can kind of get it. Sometimes I can get it. Yeah, it just doesn't work that well for lefties because your thumb lands right here and really locks it down. You might, if you're a little more dexterous than me, be able to get a finger on the clip, but overall I think it's not great because the middle finger flick just doesn't work that well. But as a righty, middle finger flick and thumb stud are excellent. Action is wonderful. This is on skiff bearings that I upgraded to, but the stainless steel bearings this came on really weren't so bad at all. It was still a really solid action. My next like on this knife is going to be the build quality. This is made really, really well. There's no doubt about it. Absolutely no blade play. Opener closed. That blade is rock solid. It is absolutely dead centered. All the hardware, all the screws, the fasteners, these standoffs feel really nice. The finishing on everything is done really well, really consistently, how everything lines up. The build quality is excellent. And when you take this apart, you can feel like on these screws, I'm pretty sure Hinderer makes all of his own hardware. It feels really nice. The threads are really smooth. They look nice, and you can tell that there's a lot of quality in this piece. And then I like the options. So this knife has options and options and options. You have different finishes. This is in stonewash blade, blue anodized stonewash handle. There's working finishes, there are black finishes. There's the different blade shapes. You can have flipper, no flipper, fuller, no fuller. You have a Warney version. There's a clip point. You have this spear point. There's a spanto. There's a harpoon spanto. There's a no-choil version. And then on the hand, you have the different options for the handle scale, different types of G10, micarta, carbon fiber that you can get these in and get aftermarket from Hinderer. There's different hardware you can get. So all the options that you can get with Hinderer things, I think is a really cool aspect. How you can have all these different blade shapes and finishes, colors and materials on one kind of line of knives. And then you can get them as you please and switch them out. Next like is this clip. I think it's actually a really good clip. It's not deep carry, which I do usually prefer, but honestly I don't mind this clip and it not being deep carry. It's pushed pretty far to the back end of the handle. What is sticking out is a nice rounded part, and it's not very bulbous. It's right where it gets narrow is what's sticking out. This clip can accommodate any pants that I've put it into, both at the lip and back here. It doesn't really get snagged or caught on pants, goes in and out really, really easily. And then in hand, when you're holding it, it's really comfortable. You really don't feel it when you're in this grip. This point kind of sits right in between these knuckles right here. And so it's not digging in. You don't really feel it at all. It's not a hot spot. You feel it a little bit when you choke up, but that's where you're going to be bearing down with less pressure. More of it's going to be in your thumb, and you're less likely to be in this hammer grip. So I think this clip is a win. I really like it. It's got solid tension, and it seems nice and tough. I think it would be hard to bend this clip out. It's pretty thick. Now my last like is going to be the finishes on this nice knife specifically. So I got this in the stonewash finish, and I just love a good stonewash finish. And this one is really nice, really smooth, really consistent stonewash finish. Same on the handle. The finishing is just gorgeous on this knife. I love the way it's finished. You can see this nice milling pattern here on the lock bar relief. Yeah, the finishing is great on this knife. Love the way it looks. I love a nice smooth stonewash, so this is perfect. Now my super like for this knife is going to be the bomb-proof feeling you get from it. So that's kind of the Hinderer thing. Super tough, overbuilt, bomb-proof, and you definitely get that feeling when you hold this in your hand. It's thick. It has some weight to it. The blade is thick. The grind is thick. It just feels so tough. Like, feels like you could put this through just about anything. It would come out kicking, especially if you were to go and switch it onto the phosphor bronze washers or Teflon washers. Just increase that toughness. Now onto the neutrals. So my first one is going to be the stock thickness. So it is definitely on the thick side, 165 thousandths. I don't hate that though, because that's kind of the point of this knife, right? It's a hard to use folder, so thick stock makes sense. I don't really mind it on this knife. It'd be cool if it was thinner, like 140 thousandths would be really cool. That's what thickness the skinnies are, and I think that's a really nice balance, but I don't mind the 160 thousandths. And then my next neutral is the price. So at $425 for the stock base version of the XM-18, it's definitely a little bit pricey, but honestly, it's not unheard of. It's not unreasonable for a high quality American made knife. I can live with that price. Would it be cool if it was cheaper? $350, $325? Yeah, that'd be super cool, but I get American made is expensive, and so I can live with the price. Now on to some dislikes. So I definitely have some dislikes for this. The first one is going to be the grind. I think it's too thick. The stock thickness, fine, but the grind being 24 thousandths back here, 27 up here in the belly, I think that's too thick for a pocket knife. Like, at the end of the day, this is a folding pocket knife. I don't think it should be that thick. I don't think it needs to be that thick. It's kind of a bit to the point where it gets in the way when you're cutting boxes and things. The thick grind combined with the thick stock really kind of hinders its cutting performance. Next dislike is the hardware types on this. So I mentioned the hardware is very high quality and nice, but I hate all the different types of hardware. So you can see this thing is a mess with different types of hardware. You have Phillips head for the clip and filler tab. You have a Torx for the lock bar insert. Over here you have Allens for the body screws. You have a flat head for this side of the pivot, and then a spanner for this side. And it's just an absolute mess. I have no idea why Rick went with like 100 different types of hardware on this. It makes it a real pain to take apart and disassemble, because at the very least, to get the pivot undone and then get the body screws off, you need 3 different types of hardware. At least sometimes you need the spanner, you need flathead, and you need Allen or hex wrenches, whatever you want to call them. Very annoying. Just make it all Torx. Make it Torx, make everything Torx. Get rid of the stupid spanner bit. Real hassle. You can make one out of a penny. I have one that I made and it works, but still it's a hassle. And then Phillips head, what's that? The Phillips head is just a magnet for stripping the screw. So make these Torx, of course. Why not? I don't understand why that wouldn't be Torx. So that's definitely a big dislike of mine. Now on to my super dislikes. So first one is going to be kind of Rick Hinderer himself a bit. Just his attitude and how he kind of interacts with customers and other people, things like that. I've heard so many negative things about him in terms of customer service and being angry if anyone ever questions him or calls into question his knives or his designs or anything like that. He really gets kind of petty about it, and he seems like he has this attitude of, I know everything about knives, like the way I do it is the only way to do it, it's the best way because that's the way I do it. I don't know, his whole attitude and things, it really kind of gets under my skin a bit. And you can kind of see it in his knives, like they haven't changed since pretty much since they started. This is a Generation 6, but fundamentally it's pretty much the same overall design and features as the original XM-18. Now you have tri-way pivot, but has much else changed? No, not really. The materials have changed a bit, but that's it. It has a snappier detent than earlier versions. So yeah, just kind of stagnant and unwilling to change, really gets petty when he's called out on things, like the whole lock bar stabilizer issue and how it does pretty much nothing. You can see I can push on this bar and move it quite a lot. I'll show you closer. So easily push that bar into the handle, despite the fancy lock bar stabilizer whose only purpose is to prevent this from happening. I can do it quite easily with one finger. So the lock bar stabilizer does nothing because there's an over travel stop on this insert, and yet Rick is insistent that it be there and that it's necessary and that it's an amazing innovation. And just to illustrate how the LBS might not be 100% necessary, here's a QSP Penguin. It costs like $100 and it's made in China. And I'm going to press on the lock bar here, and absolutely no movement. I'll take 2 fingers and press here. Almost no movement from the lock bar in towards the handle, and I'm pressing very hard, much harder than I had to press on the Hinderer. You can see a little bit of movement, but barely any. And it unlocks and locks just fine. So yeah, the lock bar stabilizer might not be 100% necessary. My next super dislike is going to be the hardness of the blades. So I don't know if this is a super dislike or just a dislike, but there have been some recent discussions, controversies, and things around the hardness of Hinderer blades. A knife maker in the community, Transparent Knives, tested his blade on his XM-18, and it was coming in at 58.6 or something like that, which for 20 CV M390, almost the same steel, is a very low hardness. Like, you're really reducing the performance of the steel at that point. And even at the highest end of Hinderer's hardness range, 61, that's on the low end for M390 20 CV. Again, you're not really getting the premium performance out of that steel, which at a price point of $425, it seems like we should be getting premium performance steel for that. And that kind of brings into the question of why are Hinderers in M390? Like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for an overbuilt hard use folder. Why not go with 4V, 3V, M4 tool steel would be a great choice. Why not go with any of those steels over the much less tough M390? And now this one's a new one on the market, so I can understand why it hasn't been used by Hinderer in the past, but MagnaCut would be a far better choice. Do MagnaCut on these, you could run it at 61, 62, get far more toughness than M390, and not sacrifice too much edge retention for that. But I digress. The hardness on the blades could and should be higher for this steel, and also this steel probably isn't the best choice for this knife. And then my last super dislike, and possibly my biggest, although I'm not sure it's the biggest deal on this knife, but it's kind of the biggest for me, is going to be the jimping. So this jimping on this knife and almost all Hinderers is awful. I hate it. I really hate the jimping. It's just bad. It's not good. It's very sharp, wide spaced, pretty coarse. I guess coarse and sharp kind of mean the same thing, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm talking about. It's far too much. Up here on your thumb, it's just too sharp. You can see it. You can see there the tread pattern as I bear down into it. You come up here, you do a pinch grip to cut into something, and it's just digging into your finger the whole time in this pinch grip. Even worse is back here in this section. The jimping is really sharp. You can see on that lock bar cutout area where the handle gets thin, the jimping is really sharp, and when I grab it, that's right where my pinky finger hits. So you go to bear down on something and your pinky finger is just digging into the jimping right here. Give it a little squeeze, and you can see on my pinky, you can see those two jimps quite clearly indented in my pinky. It's very uncomfortable. This jimping, this doesn't need to be here. This, I don't really care about. This jimping doesn't do anything. This jimping, just make it softer or make the spacing a little bit tighter, but it's just not good. The jimping is far too much. If you're using this exclusively with gloves, okay, the jimping might be a good call there, but I am not using this exclusively with gloves. Most people buying Hinderers are not wearing gloves all the time and using their Hinderers like that. It just doesn't need to be this aggressive, and it doesn't all need to be here. Get rid of all the jimping on the handle, just leave it on the blade. That would be fine, because you can easily handle, you can go past the jimping. That would be just fine. And it's even worse with a flipper, because the flipper tab is right here, so you pull the flipper and your finger's just dragging along the jimping. I had a flipper version and sold it fairly quickly for that reason. It was the jimping. So that's probably personally my biggest dislike about the knife, is being overly jimped. And you look at some other Hinderers like the Eclipse, which was, I think according to Rick, kind of supposed to be the successor to the XM-18. The Eclipse has almost no jimping. It has a little bit here, I think, and then a little bit on the blade, but this part is unjimped. Much better. Do that to this knife. Same thing on the Eclipse. No jimping, at least if I remember correctly. Way more comfortable. Okay, jimping rant over. I think that's enough about the jimping. Now, my final thoughts on the knife. I do like this knife. It's a good knife overall. It's not a bad knife. I don't hate it. It's very fun. It's very fun to play with. It looks amazing. It's built really well. And the fit and finish, the finishes on everything is spectacular. The quality is absolutely here. It's a very high quality piece. You can feel it when you pick it up, when you use it, when you take it apart. However, there are a lot of misses on this knife. Blade steel and hardness, not a fan. Jimping, massively not a fan. Grind thickness, not a fan. Hardware types are just annoying. You can deal with it, but it's just annoying. So I think with all the issues on this knife, I don't know, I have trouble 100% recommending it. And I'm actually going to be selling this soon after I make this video, if that tells you anything. Not because I hate it, but just because those things I dislike about it get in the way of the things I do. And just having a fun action and just looking nice is not quite enough to keep it in my collection, in my rotation. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. Drop a comment down below. Let me know, are you a Hinderer fan, or are you not really riding the hype train? Because there is definitely a Hinderer hype train. The Hinderer crowd is strong, very passionate, and there are a lot of them. You can tell because these knives are so difficult to get. So drop me a comment, let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts about Hinderer knives, about this Hinderer in particular, what your favorite Hinderer is, anything like that. And while you're down there commenting, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Hit that like button, would definitely help me out. Share it with a friend if you so please, would definitely appreciate it. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you on the next one.